Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Info Topics. Today, we'll be talking about money, more specifically, why the US dollar is the currency of the world. As this is a huge topic, this video will be released in two segments. In this segment, we will be talking about the history and journey of the US dollar. But before we start, here are some fun facts about the US dollar. Number 1. Dollar bills are made out of cotton and linen. Number 2. A typical lifespan for the dollar bill is only 21 months. Number 3. There are dollar bills worth $100,000. Number 4. In a study conducted at the Argonne National Laboratory, it was found that 97% of all paper money has traces of cocaine. Number 5. Today, there are $1.54 trillion worth of paper money in circulation. I can go more in depth about these facts in a separate video if you comment below. And now back to watching something mildly educational. The US dollar has a long and rich history. It was first minted in 1862 and was known as a greenback due to its iconic green color. But the first dollar, as it is known today, was printed in 1914 upon the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank. Under the Federal Reserve Bank Act of 1913, in the early 1900s, the government had recently overtaken Britain as the world's largest economy, and the government passed the Federal Reserve Bank Act of 1913 in response to unreliability and instability caused by a currency system based on banknotes issued by individual banks, which meant that pre-1913, the U.S. currency was issued by banks not run by the federal government. And even though the US had overtaken Britain as the world's largest economy, Britain was still the center of world commerce, and much of the world's intergovernmental transactions took place in pounds. Furthermore, much of the developed countries pegged or linked their currencies to gold at the time in order to create stability in transactions. But when World War I broke out in 1914, many countries needed to print more money in order to be able to sustain the costs of war. And so, many countries left the gold standard in order to print more money. But 3 years into the conflict, Britain had still not abandoned the gold standard as to keep its position as a leading currency. But now, for the first time, they were having to borrow money. And at this time, the US was an isolationist nation, meaning they did not get involved in the conflict until 1917, even if the war ended in 1918, as they felt that the war was Europe's problem. But this also meant that the US did not have to pay wartime costs and were able to stay on the gold standard. And so, many people went to the US for loans as the US dollar was linked to gold. And in 1919, Britain was forced to abandon the gold standard. By then, the dollar had replaced the pound as the world's leading reserve. And just as it had in World War I, the US kept out of World War II until well after the fighting had begun. But the US, even prior to joining the war, sold weapons, supplies, and other goods to their allies in exchange for gold. And so, by the time that the fighting had ended, the US owned the vast majority of the world's gold, and this prevented a return to the gold standard by many countries as they had spent all of their gold for American supplies. Thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe.